welcome back to the Bleeding Hearts Club, where we alchemize pain into something beautiful together. I'm your co-host, Shroot, and I am an astrologer, and this is my co-host, Stevie.
Hi.
Hi. You want to tell us who you are, what you do?
Yeah. I'm Stevie. I use they and she pronouns. I am a tarot reader, a Reiki master, a death doula, and a therapist.
Beautiful. So today we are really excited to bring you the topic of home. So we're going to be getting into that. I'm really excited to talk about this topic. I think both Stevie and I have interesting experiences with, renegotiating what home means to us. And we will likely have to do two parts to this because we just have so much to say. But I wanted to start with giving kind of an astrological definition to home. So if anybody is like an astrology enthusiast and you are curious, what where you can find like your relationship to home in your own birth chart, you would kind of look at the fourth house in astrology. So, the fourth house in astrology has to do with our sense of home, our sense of like intimacy with ourselves. It's associated with our roots, where we come from, what we root into to feel grounded, and stable. And so all of these themes are kind of themes that are associated with home. And you can kind of see your relationship to your home based on what sign is located in the fourth house, as well as what planets you have located in the fourth house. So that will definitely shape the kind of nuances and contours of like your exact relationship to your home. You can also look at the moon sign and placement in your birth chart. So the moon in astrology has to do with it's more around our emotions, and it's about like also our relationship to our mother. It's our ability to mother ourselves. I definitely also don't see this as like a gendered concept, because I think that everybody has a responsibility to mother themselves, regardless of your gender. And I also think that everybody can be a mother to others, regardless of gender. That's a hot take, but I think it's true. And so it's just that relationship to like nurturing, caring, nourishing, life-giving energy. And so all those are things that we would want to find in our home. And so that like the moon can also be a really good indicator of our relationship to our own home. So that's like really something to like look at and think about, if you have any kind of particular like placements, so let's say you have Venus in your fourth house, and let's say it's in like Pisces or something like that. So, what I would say to somebody with that placement is like, um, it's really important for you to like be in community exchange with people in your home. So it can be really helpful for you to like invite people into your home and your home be kind of like a welcoming gathering space. And also that like you can bring a certain level of like escapism into your home where yes, you have to deal with the cold, harsh reality of the world that we live in and the fact that like we live in a care shortage. But you can also invite a level of escapism where your home is a safe space for you to daydream. It's a safe space for you to just be all of your complex, messy, contradictory ways of being. And that also is a space where you can find evolution and just constantly be expanding as a person. So that would be kind of an example of how we would like make sense of, based on your sign placement in your fourth house, as well as if you have any planets there, you take the signification of the planet, how it expresses itself in that sign, and then, how do you best nurture and cultivate that energy in the home, essentially. So that's kind of, I give one example I could literally talk about forever, but if you're interested, if you have any questions about your own chart, feel free to book a reading with me and we can definitely talk about it. But I just wanted to give people a good overview. If you are an astrology enthusiast and these words make sense to you, then you can kind of explore what that means for you. So we'll also talk about tarot, but we'll go ahead and do that later. So if you are a tarot fan, then just stay tuned and we'll get to it. But I think for now, we wanted to talk a little bit about our own relationship to home and kind of unpack that. So what do you think, Stevie? What's your relationship to home?
My relationship to home, I think it's entangled with so many different layers. I just watched Shrek yesterday, so I'm really thinking about onions right now. But I think it gets mixed in with like the physical home, like the kind of home that I grew up in with my family, the kind of home that I have like built in connection to like different cities that I live in. But also being somebody in diaspora. Um, I don't know. It's just, we'll make time for that later. But I think what comes to mind for me is that back in 2021, I was going through some really major life transitions that disrupted what home looked like for me. Um, and as I was creating like a new home for myself, I was feeling really ungrounded. And I had a reading with a Filipino shaman. Her name is Lynn Pacificar, and she runs a business called Herbalaria and does readings and has a bunch of other goodies. But in my reading with her, she pulled an oracle card for me, and I think it was the hawksbill turtle. And I don't remember the full scope of what that message was, but the thing that stood out was like the hawksbill turtle like takes its home wherever it goes. And so my now working understanding or affirmation of home has been home is just wherever I am. And that has looked and felt very different over the past few years. But it is something that I come back to whenever I need grounding because I often find myself feeling homesick
Mm.
or yearning for a home in terms of like connection to land. Being somebody who was born and raised in the Bay Area, who's living in Long Beach, someone who's also like living in diaspora from my ancestral lands of Mexico and the Philippines, and maybe even Spain. I guess I'll throw that in there.
Little
Yeah.
razzle dazzle.
Yeah. I'll call them in too.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about you, Shoot?
Well, first of all, I love that. I think naming that nostalgia, first of all, or like feeling homesick is like so real. And I think for me, what comes to mind when you say that is like the place that you're homesick for doesn't even necessarily exist anymore. And we can unpack that more when we get into, the diaspora conversation, but even the places that your elders or ancestors are homesick for doesn't even exist anymore. So it's like the concept of home is like an ever evolving thing. And also it's like a figment of our imagination, which I think is so interesting. And so I think it both gives us, it's kind of like how people think of like space and how sometimes space can make people feel infinitely small and life is meaningless. What's the point? Nothing's real. Or it can be like, who fucking gives a life is meaningless. Fucking grab the bull by the horns and go. Like, like I think like that bus meme where it's like the two people are sitting in the bus on one side it's like
Yeah.
the mountain wall and it's like dark and everything and the other's like the valley of like a sunset. I
Mhm.
feel like that's like exactly like the concept of home or like what it means to us. I think it can and I've definitely experienced it as both as something that's like why does home even matter? I think it took me moving out, so I was born in Texas, but I was raised in California. I definitely would associate California with like my childhood and like I don't think I can claim anywhere other than California. And I didn't really like growing up in California. I didn't really feel an affinity or connection with people that I'll obviously love my friends to death, no problem with the people that I've met. But in terms of feeling like I fit in like society in California, like I just didn't really feel like I connected or resonated with the culture of California. I remember, when I moved, I learned English in Texas, and obviously, I don't think I had like the gnarliest accent ever, but it was just different than my peers, and so people used to make fun of me for my English accent. I was just like, I'm an Indian person, and you're making fun of me for my like slight Texan like lilts to things because I learned English in Texas and like have just been here for like maybe 2 years now, like. So I just like as a kid, like that cracked me up. Like I just thought that was like the silliest thing to be like an Indian American kid, like being made fun of for like having a Texan accent. And then growing up and watching those people in California where I was from really idolize like cowboy culture and like, like they love the cowboy, like Stagecoach being in California, like that vibe. Like it was so funny to watch that transition personally. And so I resented home a lot. I had a lot of resentment around home and I had a lot of like, who needs this? Like, the world is so much more interesting than like being at home. Like, da da da, da. I just want to be out there. I just want to be experiencing the world. Like, I've already been uprooted from this place that I had felt like was home, which was in Dallas, and our home community there, which was a really beautiful community. And I was uprooted to this place where people were not accepting. They were not interested in they were interested in conformity more so than they were interested in like my humanity as a person. And so yeah, I was always like, I'm ready to leave, like screw this place. And then I moved. I moved to Houston in 2020, and suddenly I was all alone because I didn't move somewhere where I had like too many connections with people. And even if I did have connections with people, it was still like new. They weren't people I had like known for forever, like I had felt back in California. And very quickly, I started to understand the meaning of home and why home is important and how homes can be kind of like this like crash landing pad for when you are out and you're dealing with all the unknowns of the world and you're like, experiencing things. Like you do need a safe place to kind of recharge and rest and care for yourself, and you need a little bit of consistency and safety. And I think home provides that. And so that was something that I didn't realize until the pandemic hit and I'm in a city all by myself, and having to navigate that. And so then I realized too, like, as a high risk person, chronically ill person with very little support, living in a city on my own, trying to start a business of my own, I needed to not get sick. I couldn't necessarily just like take chances with my health and go out and be social in the way that I would have had, that I was doing before the pandemic hit. And so I was like, well, if I can't leave my house like that, then I need to like really pour into my home, and I need to learn how to invest in feeling safe at home. And like I was like, okay, like I don't know the benefits of like a home, like it's not something that was obvious to me. It's something that I had valued and appreciated. So I was like, oh, I should learn how to do that. And so that's definitely like for me, like it was a big journey these last 4 years of teaching myself, like, okay, what does it look like to cultivate a home that like is like safe for me, that I feel comfortable and I feel valued. And I feel like for me, you kind of touched on a little bit, but like the land was a huge part of that, where I felt like I was a little bit too sensitive to the land in California. And when I left, there was a drought going on and it was like the worst of it. And I just felt like I was really feeling that personally. And my health has been so sensitive. So I didn't really need more reasons to like feel like shit in my body.
Yeah.
So when I got to Houston, one, I had no relationship to the land. Like I had been in California for most of my life, so I had a deep relationship to it. So it was like a fresh start in that respect. I didn't have like baggage with my relationship to the land in Houston.
Yeah.
And I was able to connect with the trees. And I was feeling super homesick, and I missed the familiarity of California as much as I was like, wow, I'm to a certain extent a California hater, in terms of like the vibe there. Love the land, but the vibe there was really like pissing me off. And so it was like I kind of even miss like the vibe. Like I miss the familiarity of knowing what to expect, whereas everything was so new to me in Houston. And what I did find that I loved was I would go on these walks in my neighborhood, and my neighborhood had these streets that like a lot of the houses hadn't been like it was one of the oldest neighborhoods in Houston. And the houses and the trees had not been touched in 100 years. So the trees were like 100 years old. And oh my God, it really helped me understand like trees are really important to me. And
Mhm.
I knew that. I had already named true trees, up until that point, because I knew that I had a deep connection with trees since I was a kid. And it was always something that I felt like was really grounding and supporting to me and held me up. But I didn't really realize just like how powerful trees could be in helping me understand my concept of home and feeling like I'm rooting into a new place and making a new place my home. Until I was really connecting with those trees on my walks. And so I was just sitting with these 100-year-old trees, and I was just so grateful to be in their presence. And I found that like that to me is like how I make my home, is like I connect with the trees in the area and I connect with the land in the area. And um that gave me this like feeling of like no matter where I go, no matter, where life takes me, like as long as there's trees around, even if there's not trees, as long as there's like greenery around, I will root into that, and I will find my kind of sense of home and belonging. And so for astrology's sake, my fourth house is in Taurus, and I have my moon there. And I have a bunch of other spicy stuff there. But just for the sake of like this example, I feel like that speaks to why that concept of trees and nature as a connection for me is so important. So yeah.
I love that so much. I'm just gotten into that.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that you can connect with the trees in that way and that like I don't know, the concept of trees being untouched for that long is so I can't even fathom it. Well, I can
That's
obviously.
so
They're untouched
beautiful.
everywhere. We're not
Yeah.
everywhere. You know
Oh,
what I mean?
that reminds me of another thing I had wanted to mention. I was like, where was I going with that? I had a place I was going. What I loved was there were so many trees in that neighborhood, and again, they were like 100 years old, that were the same type of tree that was in my parents' front yard.
Oh,
And when we moved in 2000, they were babies. And, I realized that in a lot of ways, those trees grew up with me. And so they're like, not young anymore, but they're compared to 100 years old, they're not like 100-year-old
yep.
trees. And so, like, it was like really spiritual for me to go on these walks and connect with these trees, and it was kind of like saying hi to there was other types of trees that were in people's front yards that were in my mom's backyard. And so I just felt so rooted in like a it was like when I was looking for something familiar and I was feeling a little bit homesick, I could just look at these trees and be like, oh, I do feel like I'm at home. Like, so it was
Oh,
lovely. I love
God.
trees.
Ah, me too. I love
Yeah,
that. Thanks for sharing that, pal. That is so good.
thanks. Yeah.
Okay, now we're going to get into our audience question, which is what are some low effort ways to cultivate a sense of home that aren't making a shrine? What do you think, Shroot?
Well, first of all, I love this question because I think it's really reasonable for the average person who is busy with their life and don't necessarily have the time or the energy to maintain a shrine. I think that um, the most important thing when it comes to creating a home is intention behind everything. So I think again, it comes back to that sense of like, what do you want to feel in your home? And what is the vibe that you can create that makes you feel that? And then what are the physical representations of that vibe? And so I know when we moved into our house, me and my roommates, um, my roommate freaking smashed it when it came to the decor, where she just like, you know, picked pieces that all kind of went together and have like a very homey vibe. Like it's kind of like a the color palette, the texture palette, it all evokes a sense of like comfort. And it evokes a sense of like really clean lines and like metallic accents for a little sparkle. We're both Libras. And I think for me in my room where I had kind of total control, like I really love like black furniture because I don't like the eye to be drawn to my furniture. I definitely like my furniture to kind of like I like the dark hole, the black hole vibe of furniture. I don't really like it to be a focal point in my space. I think couches are great or like other things like that, but I prefer my furniture to be kind of more um muted, and I don't really think that white furniture is muted, but so for me it was really important to pick furniture that wasn't drawing my eye and instead focus my eye on art pieces or you know all my little trinkets that I love. And so it's like my furniture, the design of my furniture in my room is really focused on displaying those things so that they pop against the dark furniture. And for some reason I always pick like a pink blanket. I'm not a pink person, and in fact, in my like most like gender confused, not confused, but like the era where I knew as a child that I wasn't a cis woman or a cis girl, and that I knew that like I wasn't going to be accepted if I was exploring my gender, and that I had to just like pretend to be a cis woman. And I was really resenting pink as a result because I felt like it was like if I claimed pink, then people would assume that I'm a gender I'm not. And it's like people are assuming that anyway. But I was just like really like rejecting pink. But at the same time, my whole life, I've always had a pink blanket that I sleep with. And even when I moved to Houston, even when I moved to Tampa, I've just kept the pink blanket. And it's not the same blanket. I bought literally different blankets, but it's like I never go into it with the intention of buying another pink blanket. And it's always the same color pink too. But it always just happens. And it's always the thing I'm gravitated toward. And so I think that like for me, I don't really even know like what vibe I'm trying to create because it doesn't really like I don't match my decor to this pink blanket. It just kind of is what it is. But like for me, it feels safe. it feels like cozy. It feels like home to me to wrap myself in this pink blanket. So I think it's like a mix of like, you know, finding a feeling, finding the vibe that fits the feeling, but then also just like sometimes you have to go outside of the lens of like, aesthetics and just really focus on feeling. I think just having the intention behind all of your choices when it comes to making your home, having the intention to be like, this creates safety for me. This creates comfort for me. This is a place where I feel like I can breathe and I can relax and I can soften in the face of how hard the world makes us. So that's my thoughts.
I didn't know that about you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not surprised about like rejecting pink, but I am surprised about the consistency of having a pink blanket.
Yeah.
I also have a pink blanket that my abuelito and abuelita gave to me when I was 2 years old, and I,
Beautiful.
no shame, have slept with it every night for the past,
Love
how old am I?
29.
27 years,
Love that.
almost 28 years. But additionally, or in addition to that, I guess, when you were talking, I was thinking about, I literally have this print that
Mm.
um just because I'm very bad at remembering that I have things when
Mhm.
I'm moving and things are
Mhm.
still in boxes. I just got this print out. I bought it a few years ago from an Inuk artist named Tristan Morgan. I will link their Instagram. But they drew this piece and I framed it, and this is what home feels like to me. Oh God, I hope you can see
Yeah, I
it.
can see it. Oh, that's beautiful.
Somebody who, for those who cannot see it, will like put it, I don't know, on a mood board or something.
Mhm.
Um, it is this person who has super long hair and they're just kind of sitting in it, kind of like a nest. And they are sitting with their chest against their knees and just kind of like bundled up, um, naked. And that is what home feels like to me, or what I want home to feel like. So I find that like I'm not the best at like, decorating and stuff, but I do love having art up and just things, kind of what you were saying earlier, Shroot, things that I can see and it feels like a reflection of myself. So this print
Mhm.
by Tristan Morgan, I saw it and I was like, that's me. And
Yeah.
that is the feeling that I want. And I remember, after I moved into my own place for the first time, and it was the first time in years that I wasn't sharing a room with somebody. The thing that made me feel most at home and settled was putting up art on my wall,
Mhm.
above my bed. Like this print was above my bed specifically.
Mm.
Um, yeah, and I think just having things that evoke that emotion, whether it's furniture, but like art. Like even
Mhm.
the house that I'm at right now, like I just got it and it's pink.
Yeah,
Like
it's gorgeous.
I have a hot pink desk, and I
Yes.
definitely would have picked this out in the fourth grade for sure.
Mhm.
And I'm picking it now
Yeah, you
as a
are.
9-year-old. So things that just feel good. I feel like art, it's almost like you get to bring in different worlds into
Mhm.
your world to create one home. Um, yeah, yeah. I don't know. Maybe someone would hear that and be like, that's a shrine. And
Maybe, yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
But I think imagery can be really powerful. Even if you change your wallpaper to something that evokes that feeling of home,
Mhm.
like do that on your phone. So
Yeah.
these are just little windows into your heart. So
Mhm.
do what you will with that.
I also think sensory, just letting into your senses in general. So, you may be in a living situation where you don't have control over much of anything. You may not be in a financial situation where you can find a bunch of art, or even like, let's say you don't have a car, you can't go to the thrift store to find some cheap art or whatever.
Mhm.
Can you use the orange peels that are left over and create like a simmer pot? And set the intention on, the simmer pot that, you're gonna use the smell to cultivate that feeling of home. Or like incense or a candle, or it could be music, like it could even be just put on some headphones and that could be a playlist idea. What is a playlist that makes you feel like home? And what I love too about sense-based work is that the meaning that we make out of the sense-based thing that we're activating is a meaning that can carry with us. So I remember the music, like I had these mixes by this like phenomenal DJ. He runs a show called the Future Beats Show. Shout out Complexion. I'm obsessed. And in 2017, 2018, there was a specific episode that I would just listen to on repeat whenever I was just suffering really bad with my chronic illness. And it just like zened me out. And like to me, like that episode made me feel like home. And so when I moved and I was surrounded by the unfamiliar and I was navigating all of that, there was that period of time, it was like 2 years, I couldn't listen to new music. Like, it was just so destabilizing for me. So I would just listen to the music that I had been listening to, but especially that mix. And I just listened to that mix all the time. And I think that like creating a relationship with something sense-based that stretches across periods of time, across changes in your life, across times when you grow and mature, it gives you this ability to like use that as a vehicle to step outside the bounds of like linear time. And create this like space, a world within your world where, you can escape to and it's a safe space. And so I think music especially is a very powerful vehicle for that, but so is like sense and stuff. And so I encourage you like make a playlist, find a mix, like find some incense, find something smell based that you can hold on to. Maybe it's your comfort show that you watch all the time that you go to have on as like background noise. Um, just anything that's like sense based. Maybe it's like a meal, a meal that you prepare that feels like I know for me like just like plain old dal chawal, which is like the basic Indian meal. I always make that when I feel really ungathered and I need to just like settle my soul. Like I literally made it today. That's what I made today. And it just like, I think that actually really helped to make that and eat that before recording this episode because that is totally for me. My concept of home is found in that meal. And so, I think it was much easier for me to have this conversation and evoke these themes, having eaten that because to me that's a representation of home. So yeah, I would say that, fuse it into every aspect of your life. And also, just to plug, if you're curious about how you can evoke those things according to your natal chart, I'll be honest, I can smash the hell out of that in a reading. So feel free to book a reading with me and mention that you want to talk about that because we can really customize a lot of practices for you that deepen your relationship to home. And I'm sure even Stevie's work in Reiki and tarot could also be a really powerful space for that. So,
Yay.
yeah. All right. Let's go
Cool.
audience question. We would love to hear from you, what you think, as well as if you have any questions, feel free to email us at bleedingheartsclub.pod@gmail.com. And you can also include your birth information, and ask us like a question. It can be personal to you, it can be general. And Stevie can pull a card for you, and I can give you a little mini reading, and we can share that on the podcast as part of our audience questions. So feel free to email us, and we can't wait to hear from you.
Woohoo.
So we're gonna get into the tarot section now. Stevie, what do you got for us?
Okay. I pulled a few cards. I pulled 3 cards about this. Just grounding into the concept of home. And I don't know, I love it so much. Okay,
Mhm.
I'm just gonna show y'all what I'm gonna use. I pulled cards from the Herb Crafters Tarot, and I feel
That's
like
beautiful. I love this deck.
this deck is so grandmotherly, and I just love it so much. The first
We're
card I
gonna
got,
link it in the show notes, by the way, if you want to check it
yes,
out.
yes, yes, yes. The first one I got is the Chariot, and I think this is
That's
cedar.
gorgeous.
Yeah, cedar. The next one is the Curandera of Earth, which I think would translate to the king. Is a king a sweet? Is that a thing?
King, well, it'd be a king of something.
Yeah, King of Pentacles, I
Oh yeah.
think.
Mhm.
That's
That's
what
the
it
thing.
would um translate to. And this is sweetgrass. So it's like an image of somebody braiding sweetgrass. I can smell it. Like I can just
Mm.
smell it through this card. And then the last one we have is the world. And it's also corresponding with Pachamama. And it's like a little rainbow. How would I even describe that? I don't
Mandala?
know.
I think it's a mandala.
Yeah.
Mandala. I don't know how people
Oh,
pronounce that.
yeah. Yes. I love that. Yes, a rainbow mandala. Okay. When we're talking about the world, I thought about just like I thought back to the home that we grew up in, not together, Shroot, although I wish we were
I
together.
know.
I wish Shroot and I went to like middle school together
For
and like
real. We would have had fun.
homes. I would have loved that so much, but it
Yeah.
would have been ruckus. It's probably for the best. We didn't.
Yeah. I feel worse for everybody else compared to I think we would have had a grand old time, but I think we would have raised a little bit too much hell, personally. But it would have been fun.
In
It's been
another
fun
life.
in our adulthood.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about just like the homes that we grow up in that like it's largely shaped by our caregivers and the people that we live with, our siblings, maybe extended family like grandparents, aunts, uncles, who knows who we shared our home with, and who knows who raised us. But it's more of like a the adults are the ones shaping what it means to have our home. Like, I also am specifically thinking about the dynamics between the people in the home, like the adults with each other. If they were present, if they were absent for one reason or another, maybe they had to work, maybe they couldn't have childcare. I was a latchkey kid. My parents worked and childcare is expensive. So after a while, it was just me like locking the door and watching unsolved mysteries all day until my mom came home, which is why I'm so paranoid now as an adult. Um, I'm
Weird.
thinking about that. It's like we don't really have control or a say in what goes on in our home. Um, and I don't know, at least for me and like how I grew up, I feel like it's just something created for us that we're just along
Mhm.
for the ride with. And so now I think as adults, I don't know, who knows, maybe youth are listening to this too, but like for me as an adult, I'm thinking about like what it means now to have, in my case, like an apartment with my spouse and my sister-in-law and our three cats and our dog. And like we get to decide what that means to us. I think I mentioned this in the last podcast or the last episode, when me and my spouse got together and started dating. All of our trauma would come up, all of our um, behavioral patterns and communication patterns would come up. Um, and we would see them, and then we would have to remind ourselves that we could do things differently. The thing that we can create together is something that like we have agency over. We can have our intentions like embedded in it. And so this concept of home now, wherever we are, um, I feel like that is just an invitation. Like you get to decide what this means to you now. um, which also means it's not a time to be passive. Like
Mhm.
wherever you are, like you are the one who gets to set the intentions, gets to, I'm hearing throw things away or like, give things away or donate things, like literally make the space of the things that you don't want in your home because it also takes up a lot of energy. Like I know I'm constantly giving things away. I'm constantly donating things, because I see it like the energy that it takes up of like, oh, I have like a box under my bed with shoes or trinkets and I don't need it, but like I know it's there and it's stressing me out. Just knowing that it's there and it doesn't have a purpose anymore
Mhm.
really stresses me out. So, any hoosers, you get to decide. Like, you are in control, the chariot, like you are in control. You get to make the decisions. It's not just really a time to lean on winging it. It is looking at what you have, deciding whether or not it's something that you want in your home. It's whether or not it's something that like brings you joy in your home or has a purpose in your home. Yeah, so moving forward with that confidence And I think deliberation and how you want to move forward in containing it or creating it. Maybe this is also a time to reflect on things that you did not like in the home that you grew up in, whether it is clutter, like physical clutter. Sometimes parents who like immigrated here, immigrated to another country, they didn't have a lot when they came here or like back home. So in this time, they're just like, I'm gonna keep everything. I don't know. Maybe I do need this Mickey Mouse plate from the 90s. It might serve a purpose one day. Honestly, I would keep that as well.
I know it gets really hard.
That's a bad example.
Honestly, I think it's a good example, unfortunately, because it's really like that.
But all of these things that just, I'm pretty sure there are so many things that I have that I'm like, I should probably give this away still. But besides the point, or part of the point, I don't
Mhm.
know. You get to decide. You get to decide what you want. And I think I'm really emphasizing this idea of intention and deliberation. Like, what do you want? What do you want this home to feel like? What is the spirit of the home that you want to cultivate? What is the like literal vibe of the home? Like, how do you want the aesthetics to look like? I always tell my spouse I want like whimsical, and then I have to describe what it means for
Mhm.
something for a home decor to be whimsical, and I really don't know how to. I just point at something and I'm like, that's whimsical.
Yeah, vibes.
Yeah. So be honest about what you want and be honest about what you don't want, especially if you're co-creating a home with somebody or living with somebody, because these are really beautiful and sometimes hard opportunities to practice something different. Like our little shadow selves are going to come up if the dishes aren't clean, or if we don't want to clean the dishes, or if we're okay with clutter or not okay with clutter, and all of these things. If we want people to come over whenever, and that's okay, or it's not okay. Like, be honest
Mhm.
about what it is you want. And also, I hope this doesn't contradict what I just said, but stop looking to others for the answers of what it means to have a home. Um, because you know it. Like you know it. Have faith in yourself and trust that things are happening for you, I guess. Um, I don't know why I said that, but that's just
Or even
one.
like through you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you're a part of like the equation, and it's important to remember that.
Yeah. So that is the chariot. It is very much, you have the agency, you have the will, you have the capacity. Um, yeah.
Okay.
That's the chariot. That's
Yeah.
home.
Ah, stunning.
Yeah.
There's an astrology piece that I think is really nice to highlight in relation to that, where one of my favorite things about the fourth house, and it's my favorite because it's actually like really hard to come to grips with sometimes. It's a challenge for sure. Which is, you know, I love that you talked about that transition from childhood where it's not a choice. It's something that's kind of we're just put into that environment, and it's up to the adults in our lives to kind of shape what home means for us. And then you talked about how as we get into adulthood, then it becomes up to us to kind of make choices around that and to be able to recognize that it's in our hands now to cultivate what home means to us. And in astrology, the fourth house has to do with not just our sense of home, but our relationship to ourself and who we are with ourselves by ourselves and our inner voice. And I think that so often the dynamics that we experience at home as children, we then grow up and they become our inner voice. And so that's one of the ways that we can find ourselves replicating the dynamics that we found at home is because we're not challenging and reconstructing and newly constructing that inner voice. And so I would say the kind of starting point, if you're wondering, if you're watching this and you're like, or listening and you're like, I don't even know where to start with that, all the things that Stevie suggested, I would suggest like, you know, it's beginning with your inner voice and really thinking about, okay, what are the patterns that are coming up here? So I love the dishes example that you gave because I get super overwhelmed at dishes, especially when it's like my dishes are stacked up. And I have a disability, so it means it's really hard for me to do dishes. And I have, really supportive roommates who have been helpful for me with that when I'm flared up. But like, I have like a complicated relationship with dishes and chores and stuff like that because of my upbringing at home where my mom was really passionate about having a clean home. And so, um, it's like, okay, in my adulthood, how do I cultivate permissiveness around the idea that I'm too disabled to keep that standard of cleanliness in my home, or that I need help if I want to keep that standard of cleanliness in my home? And so, um, it was really important for me to understand, like, okay, I'm exhibiting this level of anxiety around dishes, because of what was normalized for me as a child. And, there was nothing wrong, obviously a clean house is lovely. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's just that my circumstances as an adult are different than the circumstances through which I was raised in. Everybody was able-bodied enough to do the dishes at home when I was growing up. I am not able-bodied enough to do the dishes as an adult. So I had to learn how to accept, like, and I'm still a work in progress for sure. But I've made a lot of progress in accepting that, like, it doesn't have to cultivate shame within myself. It doesn't have to cultivate guilt or anxiety within myself. I can learn how to accept and like construct that acceptance with each choice that I make around this relationship to dishes in my home. It's something that I have the agency to choose and that I need to be like proactive about that. And I need to um actively make the choice to be permissive and to be accepting around my relationship to the struggle around that. And to understand that, like, it's nobody else's responsibility to identify that root cause and to figure out where do I have a little bit of agency and wiggle room and the ability to ask for support if I need it. What does that look like for me? Like, those are things I have to be in the driver's seat for. So yeah, that's what I just wanted to name that.
Thank you, pal.
Yeah,
Mm. You ready for the next one?
do it.
Okay. Curandera of Earth. This actually reminds me of what you were saying earlier. I'm gonna bring it back. This
Hmm.
is what it looks like. It is somebody braiding sweetgrass. Again, I want to smell it so bad.
It's a stunning artwork. There's so much like emotion there.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. Um, I feel like this card is bringing this energy of like connecting back to your body through nature and through the world around you. Um, I notice a lot, just I'm thinking a lot about what you were saying about how does your crows, there are crows, you can't hear
I
it,
heard
but
that. I heard that.
you did.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, they're
They're
cute.
calling in.
Yes. Yes,
Esteemed
diva.
caller. Yeah, guest of the podcast.
Yeah. I was thinking about what you were saying regarding how we talk to ourselves, what our self-talk, our inner voice looks like or sounds like when nobody else is around. I think about that a lot actually, because whenever I'm home alone, I do. I am not beating the negative self-talk allegations.
Yeah.
I am very much like, you're lazy
Yeah.
and you suck and you probably are an imposter. You
Mhm.
probably are. You really are. All those sweet, loving things. Um, yeah. And I think something that really takes me out of it, because sometimes, home can feel a bit like a dungeon, especially when everything's dark. You haven't cleaned in a few days.
Mhm.
Um, and it feels a little brooding, but like I live in Long Beach, so I'm maybe like a 15-minute walk from the beach. Um, there is always like a clear sunny sky and there are plants everywhere and butterflies right now and no shortage of crows. There are even like parrots, like green parrots.
That's
Um,
beautiful.
Anywho, yeah, they're cute. Um, but sometimes I do just have to like take my ass on a walk and go to the park,
Mhm.
the beach. The beach is polluted as hell, but it's still sacred. Um, and God, the park smells like piss, but it's still sacred.
Yeah.
If you can
Yeah.
just go out and receive sun or look at the sky or like let just notice like the birds
Mhm.
fly past, or a little, what is it? I'm thinking right here, a ladybug, just like
Mm.
right here, just noticing that there is
Mhm.
literally a whole world around you. And not to mention just sometimes like a whole mycelial network under you
Mhm.
with every step. And who knows what the fossils are, and who knows, like, just all these things. Like, you are so connected. And just because we have these structures, all this concrete, all these buildings and pollution and all these things, there is still very present nature. Like, that's
Mhm.
still there, and it is still there for you, even if you just want to peek outside. And, it's, yeah, I find that to be very grounding, especially when I feel really homesick. Um, like, yeah, I miss the fog. Not that there's not fog here,
Carl.
but yeah, Carl, he's just different. Like, he's
Mhm. It
a
really is.
vibe. Um, but yeah, so I think I'm thinking of this in terms of like being methodical again and intentional and deliberate in how you are connecting with yourself and also the world around you, not just in this container of home, like this building as home. Like, home is still the outside world, your little microcosm, the coffee shops that you go to that sometimes you get coffee for free from if you're lucky.
Mhm.
Or the people who walk dogs in your neighborhood that you just nod at, like, these are still part of your world, and I guess in some ways still part of your home. um yeah, we don't build a home in isolation, really. I mean, yes, in some ways, of course, we can. Like, we build these like havens for ourselves, these safe spaces and places that we can feel comfortable in, but it's also like truly world building. Like, I guess I'm
Mhm.
thinking of home as world building
Yes.
too. um
100%.
and so we have to share this human experience with other people, and animals and bugs, and the directions and the seasons and the elements and all of
Mhm.
these things. So I'm thinking a lot about just connecting to earth, as earth is our home, um tending to your heart and sharing it with others. Like, for me, I feel the most at home when I am sitting on the couch and just talking to my friend who stopped by.
Yeah.
We are watching Beyoncé music
Mm.
videos, which is
Always.
what I would do with Andrew in his home in Santa Cruz anytime
What
I
we
come
did
over.
up in Seattle in September.
Yeah. Yes. And yep, when we all went up to Seattle. That is me. That is an example of me bringing my home anywhere I go.
Anywhere. Hmm.
Um,
The Beyonce videos will come with you wherever you go.
Shout out you. Thank you for that. But
Yeah.
not also in addition to the like physical world, thinking your body and everything that nourishes it.
Hmm.
Um, I feel like there are so many layers again to like what home means, but our body
Hmm.
is at the center of it, really, because that's what is experiencing what does and what doesn't feel like home. And
Hmm.
for us to be alive and nourished in whatever way nourishment looks like that is how we are experiencing it and sensing it. So our body is a home. Our body is a home.
Hmm.
Someone said, I wish I could find this. um I'm thinking of like this meme where it's like, my body's not a temple, my body is a hydro flask with a bunch of stickers on it.
Yeah.
And I
I've seen so many variations of that meme. Yeah.
but your body is whatever emotional water bottle you have.
Hmm.
I guess. Yeah, I'll leave that there.
Yeah. Ooh, this is so juicy. I think astrologically, what comes to mind for me with everything that you shared is the relationship between the sun and the moon in our charts and in life. Where so much of I think what you even mentioned in talking about the chariot was this idea that like it was I wanted to touch on it when you talked about like oh yeah, I want to bring whimsical into my space. And like, what does that mean? And being able to point at something and know that that's whimsical. That's so the moon because it's about a feeling. We want to evoke a feeling in our spaces and we want to associate home, the idea of home with certain feelings. And so what like so I think it's kind of a combination of Cancer and Pisces in that realm of like, Cancer is what is the feeling, and then Pisces is what is the vibe that you cultivate that evokes that feeling. So it's like whimsical makes you feel how does whimsical make you feel?
Me?
Hmm.
Um, that's a good question. I have like an image in my head.
Hmm.
Honestly, okay. Whimsical to me feels like uh, just like a really giddy
Yeah.
4-year-old
Yeah,
self.
like light, right? Like I don't
Mhm.
know if bubbly is the exact right word, but I yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like that's the
Effervescent.
feeling. Yeah, effervescent. Yeah. So that's the feeling and whimsical is the vibe that produces that feeling. I just wanted to give like the example to really flesh this out what I'm trying
Mm.
to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's kind of like you can either work with like the vibe and then think about okay, what does the vibe make me feel, which is what we just did. Or you can say I want to feel this and what makes me feel that. So for me, I know that um I respond really well to lots of really bright colors. And, in my adulthood, I've lived in spaces that I've rented, right? I obviously haven't owned any of the places that I've lived. And so, what does it mean to bring in vibrance and also the fact that I've moved so much? So, how much am I really going to be investing? And I'm disabled. So, how much am I really going to be investing, knowing that I love bright colors, knowing that they're so important to me to make me feel alive and to make me feel stimulated? Um, how do I bring that into my space in ways that work for me without needing to like splatter color everywhere all over the walls and create a bunch of artwork and stuff that I have to pack up and move all the time. So for me, it's as simple as, getting little, I've shared this in so many readings and stuff like that, but this is where I keep my pens. And I'm not going to show the back because I'll probably get dinged on YouTube or something. But
Is it a butt?
it's a butt. Yeah, it's totally a butt. We'll do a little side profile. So you can put anything you want in this. I think it was originally a brush holder, but I got it custom made by the artist, and I wish she still made these. I would link her, but um, so like for me, this is the freaking blurry background. I'm
I
fighting for my
know,
life here.
seriously.
I feel like I'm on YouTube. Um, Anyway, you get the point. But yeah, so for me, it's like I make sure that I'm constantly surrounded by these were really, really, affordable, very cheap. You still can't see them. But these are
Washi.
a bunch of washi tapes from Target, and then the holders are from eBay, or not eBay, Etsy. And so it's like this cost me, very little money, and I keep it on my desk, and I barely even use the tapes itself. It's more just like a visual stem of like something sparkly and rainbow and shiny, and like to me, it's a reminder that like, you know, it's like communicating safety to myself of like I chose these things and I chose these things that have meaning to me and that like they cultivate a feeling within me of safety, of self, what's the word? Like acknowledgement almost. It's like I see me when I look at those things because I chose them and they mean so much to me and they like represent me in a way. So it's like I'm like seeing myself reflected back to me when I look at these things. And then of course I use them, especially the pens, I use them a lot. I use them for my new moon manifestations in my workshops. Those are the pens that I draw from. And so it's always like set with this intention of like amplifying my sense of self back to me. And that's like the vibe and the feeling that I like to cultivate in my space. And so I just really wanted to name that that's like really, really important to understand. And that's kind of our relationship to the moon and how the moon relates to our sense of home. And so then the piece that you talked about when it came to going outside and taking, forcing yourself to go on a walk and forcing yourself to experience, the home that is the world that you live in. And that could be on a micro level of like your neighborhood, the beach, your city, but also on the macro level of like bringing your home with you to Seattle and traveling and what that looks like. So like that's very much the sun. And it's this idea that like we are part of a bigger picture and that like you are an important piece of that bigger picture and you won't know or perceive how important you are to that picture until you get out there and see for yourself. And this idea that like there is just this larger world around you that like you can like it's kind of like with the moon you can burrow in and have that deep rich vibrant explicit like detailed inner world And then it can also get like stagnant and stale, and it can be really like stifling in there if you're kind of in there for too long. And then it's like you go out and you're like, oh my God, like there's a whole world out here, and like I can feel at home out here as well. I can feel like I'm a part of something bigger, and that my role in this is super meaningful. Just me being my authentic self is bringing so much to this world. So like connecting with the world in that way is like, I think, a really powerful reminder that our home exists in like a layered concept. So I love that you brought up the body, right? So it's kind of like, our first home was our mom's womb. I think we can even get really meta with it. And so our first home was our grandma's womb because we were an egg in our mom's ovary when grandma was pregnant with us. Or sorry, when grandma was pregnant with our mom. So that's technically our first home if we want to get real meta with it. And so it's like we've kind of moved through technically two wombs, and then if we really, really get technical, all the wombs that came before grandma. Um, and then we were birthed into, so that would be the moon, and then we were birthed into this world, which would be the sun. And in this world, we operate a home in our bodies, we operate a home in our rooms, our havens, like you described, and then the larger house that we may share with roommates or partners and pets, like you said, and bugs. And then the larger space of like the nature surrounding us, the mycelium network under us, the sky above us, the water around us, like all those things, as well as like, like it kind of just goes out from there. And all of that is something that we can feel a sense of like home like kinship to. And that there's just various levels of that. And I love that. So yeah, to me that's easily represented by the sun and the moon in astrology. So
Love the way that you framed it that way.
thank
Yay. Okay. So the last card, hooray, is the world. And it is represented by Pachamama. For those who may be unfamiliar with Pachamama, she is, I think, the Incan goddess that represents Mother Earth, or Earth Mother. And yeah, this card is, I would say, about like really building off what we were talking about before. Just we are one piece of all of these different systems, all of these little ecosystems and environments and communities. It's, I think, just bringing back this idea of like wholeness and connectedness. Um, I think this one would also be like connectedness with all parts of yourself. Um, let's see, I'm trying to think about how I want to frame this. So sometimes I'm thinking of like the end of something. Like when something ends, kind of like what we were talking about before, like in our previous episode, the end of something, but it's in the previous episode, it was very much like a forced ending, like almost a
you.
rupture.
Mm-hmm.
But this feels a little more different. Like this card feels like the end of a cycle, old patterns, closing a chapter, and things like that. Um, and like creating this home and filling it with things that like bring a sense of abundance, things that like it feels like the materialization of those intentions, those deliberations, and like truly alchemizing the pain into something beautiful. Like so many things that you had to contend with, so many things that you had to release. um and so I think about reflecting, and I guess I invite you to reflect about what this journey was like in order to get here, in order to attain this feeling of home, this home that you're building, whether it's in your mind, your body, like the physical world. How did you get here? What was this journey like? Who did you meet along the way? What versions of yourself did you meet along the way as well? And how can you celebrate yourself? Because you're at the core of this journey. You had the setbacks, you had the comebacks. And I'm thinking about replacing old stories with something that affirms you and empowers you, because I'm sure it wasn't easy. I'm sure it was really hard. I would bet the little money I have on it. And so these lessons that you learned, or the lessons that you're learning, get to be the seeds that you plant. Because like, it sure, this is ending, but life is ongoing, growth is ongoing, home is like constantly changing and constantly evolving with you and what you're learning about yourself and the world around you. I also want to mention, as we're building a home and as things feel good and secure, I think a lot of people get into a habit of not wanting to look at the bad, or not wanting to bring in the shadow of themselves into this home, this goodness. Like, I work so hard. I don't want to think about that part of myself anymore. I don't want to think about the pain. I don't want to think about how I used to act, or how toxic I was, or how much X, Y, and Z. Like, I think about how important it is to bring those parts of yourself into your home, because you wouldn't have been able to create this home without them. The healing and the growth that you did comes from your relationship with that shadow self. And they they deserve to be there. They deserve a seat at the table. They deserve a meal and a room and a drawer in your dresser. Yeah, I just want to remind y'all that like, you can't really pick and choose. I know this whole thing was like pick and choose, but like, really, when it comes to your shadow self, like, there's so much power and medicine in them, and with them. But like, they were always operating from a place of love and protection over yourself, even though it doesn't feel like that, even though it feels like you have no control over them. It's because they would have done anything to protect you. And yeah, and you get to work together and decide like what gets to be different, how you get to move forward together. It's not something that you really leave behind in the dust. Yeah.
Yeah. Ooh, juicy. Um, wow. I'm like taking that in. That was
Yeah.
really nice to hear. I hope that everybody else feels how I'm feeling right now. I feel really nourished by that. Um, and I think I had so many things I wanted to say, and I just feel like this like pleasant wave of just like love has just washed over me after what you said. I'm like, I don't know what I was thinking. But I think one thing I can start with is um when it comes to our shadow self and not wanting to invite that into our home, um, and into our concept of home, even if, you know, it's maybe not literally our home, but in our body, for example. If we don't invite our shadow selves and make space for our shadow selves within our home, like where's that thing gonna go? You know, like it's a part of us. And I think it's so important what you said of like this idea of home is a space for all of us. And yes, we can choose the home. Well, you know, we're limited even in those constraints when it comes to capitalism.
Yeah.
But we can choose, you know, the parts that we have control over. We can choose what we do to nourish that home and to create the vibe and all that stuff. And but we can't choose what versions of ourselves to bring into that home. We have to make a home that is available to all versions of ourselves. And I actually think that that goes back to childhood, where, you know, I would argue probably most of us, you know, very, very minority of people had a home that made space for all versions of themselves. And I think everybody to a certain extent had to grapple with the idea that you're kind of subliminally or overtly taught that there is versions of you that are not welcome in your home. And I think especially queer people really get to grapple with that. People who are not of the same religion as their parents. You know, any of these markers that mark you as an outsider in your home. You're kind of, whether you agree or not, you are given the message that there are parts of you that are not welcome. And I think that in adulthood, we can find ourselves replicating that dynamic with other parts of ourselves or those same parts of ourselves where um it's like, I think something I'm working through is that it may be difficult to accept all parts of ourselves and to maybe embrace all parts of ourselves and to nourish all parts of ourselves. But like you said, can we make a dresser for them? Can we create space for them anyway? And so I think a good question to ask yourself is, what active practices can you take to make space for your all versions of yourself, especially the versions of you that you're most scared of? And I think that's a really, really powerful exercise to soften your relationship with the parts of you you're most scared of, because um, that's kind of the first step to cultivating a relationship with those parts of you is being able to say, we're maybe not on the best terms right now. Maybe I'm not in a place where I can accept you right now, but here, you can sleep here. Like, here's a place you can stay. So yeah, what does that look like to create that for yourself? And I think something that I deal with, and I think to a certain extent, this is again that relationship with the sun and moon. I think it's no accident that we're having this conversation between that translation, from Cancer season to Leo seasons. That's the transition from the moon to the sun, where a question of like worthiness comes up. And I think that when it comes to that conversation of like acceptance of all parts of ourselves and making a home for all parts of ourselves, and I think even like the idea of like what does mothering ourselves looks like in this context. I've been really struggling with this idea that like um what does it, if I can choose how I want to mother myself, and again, like if it's a relationship like with myself to a certain extent in my own head, I'm not limited by the confines of capitalism. I'm not limited by the confines of my like disabled reality, all that kind of stuff. Like the limitations that I might find in the material world that I live in are not present in my mind. I have like to a certain extent vast control over my mind and the space that I want to create. And yet I'm still avoiding this topic. I'm still, struggling with the idea of if I can choose how to mother myself, how do I want to mother myself? Like to me, I come up blank. And so I think for me, yeah, like it's a question of like worthiness was always, and I think that's the sun, like this idea of feeling worthy, like it was always tied to performance, whether that was performance of like success or performance of like a gendered identity, for example. So for me, it was performing girlhood, and especially South Asian girlhood. And I think that it was really important for me, or like it is a process that I'm learning, like, how do I create an environment in my own head and in my body where I'm not performing worthiness, where I just simply am worthy of that kind of love and care. And so I think that it's really important that we like get in the ring with that. Even if it's as simple as like Stevie said, just making space for that version of ourselves as like a starting point, but to keep kind of pushing forward on that journey, and keep seeing how close you can get to finding out what those answers look like for you. And also treating this as like an experiment, because there's no wrong answers, there's just growth, and learning. And also this idea of like, I think sometimes for me, I don't know if anybody else can relate to this. I know the agoraphobes can relate to this, but like the world can be so scary. Like, and it can feel, especially I think people who have been experienced persecution for your identity, whether that's along race, gender, class, being an immigrant, etc. Like, um, it can feel like the place that you're living in isn't safe. And especially in the climate that we're in now around the world. And so I think in the face of that insecurity, in the face of that fear, um, I think we should remember that those fears are produced by the physical world that we live in, by the reality of the material world that we live in. But we do have a limitless capacity to reach into the spiritual, and to tap into Pachamama, to tap into Mother Earth, to tap into our ancestors, how we got here, like you said, you know, um, and to tap into past versions of ourselves. I like to think of future versions of ourselves as our ancestors. So we can tap into those, and leverage the strength that we can gain from all those things, um, to navigate this world that we may not feel like is welcoming us in a home in a way that we would want to be welcomed. And so it's like a duality of how do we cultivate that sense of home for ourselves, for accepting all parts of ourselves within our home, very much moon energy. And then how do we then leverage strength from that acceptance, but then also strength from Mother Earth, strength from our ancestors, strength from past versions of ourselves, How do we leverage all of that to then give us the strength to walk out in the world and feel worthy of taking up space in places that do not welcome us? So yeah, that's what I would say. It's that relationship between the moon and the sun and home.
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 What a concept.
Yeah. Ah, this
What
was
an
just a nice
experience.
conversation. Yeah, for real. What like evolution? Like I even feel just so much better about that concept. Uh just having this conversation. Like I feel a lot more peace around this topic, which is not a peaceful topic for me. So, um I love that we did this.
Thanks for having this conversation with me, pal.
Yeah, mutual. Thank you. Oof, that's wonderful. I hope people are feeling the same way we are. Let us know. Feel free to send us an email, comment on our socials. Let us know how this podcast made you feel because I hope you're feeling as good as we are.
And
So
if not, that's fine. That's your experience.
it's true. If you're mad at us, you can tell us that too.
Yeah,
So.
that's space for
um, well, thank you for joining us on another episode of Bleeding Hearts Club. Do you have any final thoughts, Stevie, before we wrap up?
Um, I am just grateful for everything, for you, for whoever is listening to this, for whoever has helped us reimagine and reconstruct what home means to us.
Mood. I love
Ditto.
that. Yay. Well, that was another episode, and we highly encourage you if you want to keep the good vibes going, you can book a reading with us. We offer a joint tarot and astrology reading called Dance with Datura that helps you cultivate the best strategies for yourself to bloom even in the dark. And you can find that in the link in the show notes. And we'll see you next time.
Wait,
What? Did I forget something?
where can we find you?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
I do this every time. Okay.
it's just
Just
part of it now.
yeah, it is. It's our bit. You can find me on all social media, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube. It's all of it at True Trees and my website, truetrees.com, where you can book astrology readings with me. And what about you, Stevie?
You can find me at cosmic dot return on Instagram and TikTok for however long TikTok
I know.
exists in the world.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everyone. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Ring that
Yes.
notification bell or whatever it is you
Yes.
do.
Leave us a
For
comment.
review.
Yeah, leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts and share this with your friends. Share it on social media. Feel free to have a conversation about these topics with your friends and come bring your community into our community and we can share space together. Um, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
See you next time.
Bye.